Fine. I'll help you do the damn dishes.
Oh, come on. You know what? No, that's not what I want.
You just said that you want me to help you do the dishes.
I want you to want to do the dishes.
Why would I want to do dishes? Why?
See, that's my whole point.
Let me see if I'm following this, okay? Are you telling me that you're upset because I don't have a strong desire to clean dishes?
No, I'm upset because you don't have a strong desire to offer to do the dishes.
I just did.
After I asked you.
Jesus, Brooke, you're acting crazy again.
Don't you call me crazy. I am not crazy.
I didn't call you crazy. I didn't
did.
call you crazy. No, I didn't. I said you're acting crazy.
Okay, I have to know, why did you pick this? Is it because the guy in the film, his name is Gary?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And scene.
That's right. Yeah. So exactly. So why
Right?
would
That's
I
the
not?
end of it.
I think that is outside of the great name. I think it's a great. It's probably one of Hollywood's best lines in that little segment there discussing relationships.
Yeah.
Because we're thinking about what? What are we thinking about? The arguments over
Just trivial things.
the dishes. Like
Right.
everybody's like, and I would argue that he's right. Like
Of course you would, but
Yeah.
he's not, just so you know.
just like he did it. He said he was going to do them, and it's not that. It's like I
Right.
want you to want it. Who wants to do the dishes?
Right. But I mean, she doesn't want to do them either. But I think
Right.
the big thing, first of all, what movie is that?
It's from the breakup.
Oh, okay.
Coincidentally, I'm not saying that they broke up then, but obviously you could see where their
I
path
kind of
is
love the
headed.
fact that you openly are admitting that you watch rom-coms.
Okay. Yes,
Big
I do.
cop,
Yeah.
boss man.
Right.
He loves rom-coms, which I
Rom-coms,
love.
yeah.
That's very cool.
Yes.
Why did you pick that, though?
I think because it instantly talks about we think they're arguing over the dishes. And what we're really seeing is two people that are trying to establish relationships norms. Not going too deep into it, but that's really what it comes down to is what do you do versus what do I do? And what are the expectations in a relationship? And when we start to look at, us and the relationships that we've had over the years, going back to maybe high school or middle school or even grammar school where you think you like someone, we're always about establishing what a true relationship looks like. So this was just a good example of it.
Well, it's so interesting because, right, so we both have kids and they never give you a book on how to raise your kids, right? And we always talk about that. Like, there's no golden book. How do you raise your children? But there's also not a book about how to have a healthy relationship. And the reason I think we should dive into this more is because who even establishes what is a healthy relationship and kind of we get to a bigger conversation with this, which is at the heart of something that is really hard to talk about, which is domestic violence and domestic disputes and just chaos in the household. And I do think in some regard, Gary, that there is so much focus on kind of the aftermath. Could there have been a restraining order? Could there have been more laws passed? Could there? When really, I think we need to dig deeper and look at, well, how do we prevent domestic violence from even being a reality? And I think it does start with what even is a healthy relationship, which sounds like a really silly question, but it's true because we start to think about that. I don't know. I was 5 when I knew I wanted to get married.
Okay.
I'm
think I
telling
was
you.
5. No,
I was. I mean, little girls dream about their weddings when they're 5, 6 years old. And yet it's funny because parents will make jokes about, well, I have a son, I have a 7-year-old, and there are moms at the school that will already knock whatever girl eventually will like their son. They're never going to be good enough for my son. And I think to myself, oh, is your son hearing you say that? Because I feel like they're going to think, oh, well, as long as I'm good with mom, I could treat her however I want. I don't mean to jump from, A to Z there, but I do think you got to talk about what is a healthy relationship and when do you start to talk about that?
Well, go back to think of a relationship that you may have had in high school. Mm-hmm. And very few people have a relationship in high school that lasts through to marriage and beyond. And if you think of some of the challenges that happen in high school, what do we see in a relationship in high school? We see, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of you. Who are you talking to? Why are you talking to him? How come you didn't answer my call? All those things that are natural in a relationship, or if they break up, all the rejection and trauma that happens as a high school kid, just a kid having a relationship.
Right.
Normally that you grow out of those kind of things, those rejection things, the jealousy things, the control things. But sometimes people don't.
Yeah.
And we don't have those conversations to say, how do you say to somebody it's okay that you were in a relationship and she broke up with you or you broke up with him, it just kind of, we don't have those conversations. And sometimes those are the conversations that we need to start thinking about, because kids don't really understand that what they're actually experiencing is normal. However, it's not normal when you start to attribute relationship. You get rejected. And then you say, well, the next relationship, what did I do wrong? So now I'm going to have more control. Does she like me? Does she really like me? Who are you talking to? And especially now that we look at social media and how you can have that 24-hour-a-day access with someone, I think that that's kind of where we start.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that I brought up rom-coms. I'm going to also kind of poke fun at this, although I totally agree with Gary, that you also like Bluey.
I do, yes.
And he's like, why are you bringing this up right now?
know,
So
why am I
Bluey
bringing
is
this up?
great, by the way. It's not just for kids and the dogs. It's actually great for adults. I also love Bluey and absolutely have watched Bluey without Chase in the room. Full disclosure. There's an episode of Bluey, and you're going to be like, I don't remember that one. You do. There's an episode of Bluey where Bluey's cousin, Muffin, is in the back seat, and the dad in the beginning of the episode tells her, you're the most wonderful child in the world. You're the perfect child. You're the best, basically. By the end of the episode, though, because Muffin in her mind is like, oh, I'm the best. She's mean to Bluey. She's mean to Bingo. And by the end of the episode, the dad goes, hey, you know how I said that to you at the beginning of the day? So you're the best to me and Mom, but you're probably not the best to anybody else. Do you remember that episode?
I do,
knew it.
yes.
I knew you saw
Yeah.
it. But I think it's such a telling, lesson really for adults, because kind of going back, Gary, to what you were saying, which is dealing with rejection.
That's
How often do you see that as soon as your kid, even if they haven't been rejected, let's talk about the group of 7-year-olds who hang out with my son. Those moms already have it in their mind planned for, and again, will they actually do something bad? I hope not. But I'm going to slash that girl's tires, or, wait till his, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go after her. Like that is the kind of language. And remember, maybe our kids don't hear it or don't care about what we're
Right.
saying, and they know you're not going to do it. But I think it's setting that precedent. Like I've told my son, listen, I love you. I would take a bullet for you. I would do anything. Don't laugh, because Gary knows what I'm going to say. But I told him, if you ever put your hands on a girl, I'm going to slap you offside the head. I'm going to tell you right now, that is just never going to be okay in this household. And you have to have respect for women. I don't care what they have done. You have to have respect for women. And I have no problem saying that to my son, because that is the truth. But do people have those conversations with their kids, or even deal with rejection?
Right.
Right?
It does. And that's what I mean. I think about dating in high school, and, I'm over it. Even though I was going to say that.
It's okay. Do you need me
Yeah,
to?
I
are you
remember.
okay?
Yeah,
You
I think
sure?
I am.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
over it, but I'll bring it up. Not to say that I'm reliving it, but that the fact that I remember when I was dating a girl and she broke up with me after 11 months. Broke
really
my heart.
sorry.
I know. In 11 months, 3 days, and 22 hours.
By the way, Gary is happily married with 3 children and living his best life. But
That's
go
right.
on. Sure.
So
Not
I think
this
that
girl,
we
though.
no.
No.
Her loss. Yeah, her loss. But
loss.
but I remember that, and
Yeah.
I just feel so overwhelmed by it. You're brokenhearted, and we move on from it, but you become jealous, and then the natural tendency for that. For me was to, how do I get her back? You call more. You start to, I'm not saying that I was stalking, but I'm thinking as a teenager, what are you doing? Either you avoid everything
Right.
and you don't want to go near her, or you start to find out, well, where is she? What is she doing? You go to a restaurant, you go to where she's working, you just kind of show up there. And I think because that part of it is a natural element of having relationships.
Well, and nobody talks about it, though. Because even the fact that you have to go, well, I wasn't stalking. Of course you weren't. You were a teenager who had your heart broken, and you want to know why. You want to close that door. You want to have closure. You want to understand it. You want to have your last chance, right? I want to have kind of the final word, because I was the one that got hurt. Those, I think, are all very natural sayings. But even the idea that if you bring up that insecurity or that vulnerability, you're either knocked because, well, you're a weak guy. How could you feel that way?
Yeah.
Women they don't define you. Or you're seen as like, okay, you're crazy, you're a psycho, you're a stalker. No, you're not. You are a teenager trying to navigate what that looks like. But I would imagine that's not a normal conversation in the average household. I just don't think it is. I just don't think it is. I mean, I can also remember, thankfully, I've only dated 2 people and I married the second one. But in the relationship I had in high school, I also was dumped.
I don't know why we're
Maybe it's us.
Maybe it's us.
Maybe we're the
They're
problem.
trying to-
Maybe
I
that's
think
it.
it
They
is.
just got to get away from us.
Yes.
But I remember going through that, and it was hard for my parents because, in the words of Muffin, I was the best, right? I'm the best thing, for my parents. They were great. But I remember my mom, I really valued the fact that she brought up her breakups and how she looked at them and how she handled them. And for me, I felt seen. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel like I was isolated or that I was crazy. And we talked about it. And I moved on in a very graceful and honestly healthy way. But I don't hear those conversations. And if people are wondering, well, why are we harping on this so much? I think one of the biggest problems we have in America when we talk about domestic violence and we talk about, and we'll talk about some of these cases we've seen recently, is that we're not focusing on prevention enough. We're not giving kids, like I know my 7-year-old, while he's only in 2nd grade, has already mentioned that he has interests in school. He has already mentioned that he would like to kiss a girl that he has known now for 3 years. And my husband and I are sitting there and immediately we're like, what? No, right? But that's not what comes out. I say, okay, well, that's because you're having feelings. He's a human, right? We can't just write off that kids are going to want to be in romantic relationships. Let's look at how we got to this place. I am in a romantic relationship with my husband. You know what I'm saying? But we forget that and we write it off. And then all of a sudden these kids are now in college, and where's the number, some of the top places where sex assault, domestic violence, it begins on high school and college campuses.
Sure. Yeah, I want to go back to one thing you said though, because you said you were also dumped. I don't think I used the term that I was dumped. I didn't. So I
no,
just
you
want to
did.
clarify
You said
that.
she dumped me.
Did I say that? Okay.
I believe so. We could roll back the tapes, right? I think you did say that. Though.
Yeah.
Why? What would you prefer to say, Gary? I'm sorry.
I don't know. She
dumped you, sweetie. It was
she chose wrong, maybe. I don't know.
Well, no, that's part.
I just want to clarify
right?
that. I don't know whether I used the word dump. Okay, so we were
don't know
both
why
dumped
she did
at one
it.
point.
We don't know, and we can investigate that.
Okay, all right. It just makes me feel better.
No,
so
I think you're great.
So I think that you're right. I think some of the things that we look at grow. So we move on, but if you start to look at some of the things that in our first relationships when we're kids, and it'll play into what we're talking about now. If you think about like we confuse jealousy with love as a kid, like if she's jealous of me, that means that she or he likes the person that they're dating. And that's kind of a confusion because oftentimes you test it. You know, I remember, dating and it would be like she would be talking to someone else. And some of that was to see if I was jealous of it. And you kind of confuse jealousy with love. So especially now, how does that play into it? You monitor someone's phone. You kind of look at, you question who they're with. Why are they talking to them? But actually that's control. And possessiveness, and that'll play into some of these cases we see, later on.
Yeah,
and I think that that's kind of one of those ways that it shows itself in future relationships if you don't grow out of that.
Yeah, well, and to be totally transparent, I think that we also don't look at the weight of example in the household. So. The only example I really grew up with were my parents. My parents are awesome. They're great. They raised 5 great kids. They are awesome. They're great. But, I grew up in a household, for example, my mom is a hard no PDA. Absolutely not. Like to the point that we could not sit on the couch with our boyfriend or girlfriend, even if it was long term. Absolutely not. Like opposite ends of the couch, do not hold hands, no. Even if they walked in the door, like no hugging at the door, like that. It was hardcore. We don't show people that's all behind closed doors. But it's funny because, so the man I married now, my college sweetheart, I was so weird with him. The first few years of dating, I was very weird with him, like almost neurotic. And it was, because he would come into a doorway and I'd be like, oh, like just don't even come near me. And he's like, what did I do? Like, why is this woman repulsive of me? It like repulsed by me. But it's so true. Like these were things that, again, I learned in my environment. And not to say that my parents don't have a healthy relationship, but I think, one of the things that we ended up having to really work through in marriage counseling early on in our marriage was my husband's like, I feel like my wife doesn't fully trust me. I feel like my wife doesn't feel comfortable with me. And that's something that I then am insecure and I'm not the husband I want to be. And we realized that's generational relationships in the example. And I think we have to also recognize that we're leading by example as well, and kind of the importance of breaking generational habits or even traumas. I mean, how many times, Gary, do we see that kids end up going down this path of being cruel to their partners because dad always raised his voice at his wife, or, she would throw a chair. I mean, who was it? That woman who was going to be the Bachelorette, and they canceled her show because she threw a stool in front of her kid at her long-term boyfriend. I mean, I think you have to recognize also that actions in the household are going to probably have an impact generationally
Well, they are.
as well.
We know that. That's why we do
Right.
a lot of work people should really do a lot of work to mentor kids on what a healthy relationship is
Mm-hmm.
and how to have those healthy relationships. Because if you look at it, some of the things from high school, I mean, I'm just kind of kicking it around, but you ignore those gut feelings. Like you think something's wrong, but you kind of ignore it, or you overshare, or you think you can fix them, even though you have that. And the big thing that you mentioned was how do you handle rejection? Because a lot of things that we see in now cases, and we'll talk about those cases, a couple of them that have happened around the country, it's the rejection. Because rejection, how does that rejection show itself in a marriage? Divorce. I'm divorcing you. That is an ultimate sign of rejection. Now, if that individual has never coped with what rejection is and what it means and how to deal with it from high school or middle school, that can in fact reflect itself in some of the violence or that path towards violence as we move forward in this divorce proceeding. That they're like, I'm rejecting, you are still going to be with me, and all those things of possessiveness, jealousness. Then you get into the stalking. Where are you? Who are you with? Because ultimately, in any relationship, even in high school or elementary school, there is that level of control.
Right.
Like, because you're trying to figure out why don't you call me? Sit with me on the bus. Whatever.
Right.
And
Those
if we start-
insecurities, those vulnerabilities.
and if we
get
don't
heightened.
and if we don't grow out of it, and they follow us through to adulthood, that's when we can find out that these cases potentially have
Consequences.
and have the consequences towards it's going to go to a toxic relationship, and
Right.
ultimately some of them are going to head to violence.
I mean, so it's interesting because the timing of this podcast in particular was because here in Connecticut, Gary sits on the board for what we call the Center for Family Justice. It's a nonprofit organization. They help survivors and their families who have been impacted by domestic violence in Southern Connecticut. And they have their annual Walk a Mile event coming up. And actually, yeah, it's this weekend. And so we thought, let's time it around that. But just this month alone, Gary, we have seen cases, some of the most egregious domestic violence cases in America in recent years. Got to bring up Louisiana, where 8 children were murdered because of a domestic dispute between a man and, honestly, 2 women that he shared these children with.
Yes.
But also, we had the situation in was it Virginia, the former lieutenant governor who killed his wife, but then turned the gun on himself.
Yeah, that happened before that. That's right. Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, I believe, in Virginia. Now you look at them, and both, what do they have in common? Well, it's a domestic violence situation that the woman was killed. And in Louisiana case, it was a family annihilation where the entire family was killed. But they're also different. And that's really what we need to understand, is that there's different parts to each of those investigations and each of those cases. You look at the Louisiana case where all those children were killed, and some of the people wonder why. Why do some cases happen where just the spouse is killed, and then other cases they find out that they killed the whole family? And what happens is the individual starts to connect these kids with the spouse, with the person, and it starts to blend that together. And basically, that, like you've seen in high school, if you can't have me, you can't have anybody. I mean, that's what it is. Why are you not with me? Why you should be with me? You can't have anybody. When that starts to manifest itself into a long-term adult relationship where that rejection comes out and you don't know how to handle it, and I will control you and I'll do all I can to control you, that's when you'll start to see those severe cases of domestic violence and death. And what we find is that these cases don't. This is what's so important about this conversation. We have to remember these cases of violence don't start out violent. They don't start. Most of relationships start out happy.
Right.
We have to understand why they go down a path where they're unhappy. And sometimes they do, and that's the reality of it. What we have to do is make sure that people can extricate themselves safely from those relationships that are not working out. What we see in these severe cases are they can't. And oftentimes it's because they've never understood how to cope with rejection and jealousy, and those patterns that you have in relationships as a kid, you've never broke them. You never discarded all that.
So, I mean, I think that we have to kind of get real as people. And even if we don't have kids, just the importance of having those healthy kind of conversations. So even if you're a school teacher, if you're a bus driver, if you are I don't know, if you come into contact, I feel like with the next generation in some regard, we should be able to I guess acknowledge, but also just let them know that they're seen, but also that it's totally normal to have feelings. But we have to dig into what those feelings really mean and what they could imply. And obviously you tailor it to the age group and everything. But
Sure.
I don't know, you recognize that because to your point, I think most people enter into relationships and we all kind of look at them differently. But I think the average person can recognize what's healthy and what's not, but sometimes it's too late to fix it.
That's right. And you're in it. You're in it at that point. And then the hardest time in these adult relationships are when you want to extricate yourself from it. And we know that some of the hardest, we want to stop it. Bottom line is the reason we're having these conversations, well, as you know, just as well as I do, we want to prevent it. Louisiana has some really good services on domestic violence. Doesn't matter because 8 kids are killed and two adults, and he killed himself. I don't think the adults, thankfully, died. The spouse and the girlfriend died. I don't think they did, but there were 8 kids killed. So they have the great services, but we got to do all we can to prevent it. And I think that's why this discussion is so important. We have to recognize that our kids are just having relationships, and we're being disappointed. You know, having relationships as high school people is very disappointing. It's great. Not that. Look, I'm over it. Okay, I think I'm over it.
You did
I was
get
rejected.
dumped, though. Yeah, you did.
I think you're right. I did get dumped. But I think at the end of the day, I think we have to figure that out. We start out in a light conversation, and who's going to do the dishes? It's not about the dishes. It's about the relationship. Who's going to do them? Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think he was right.
He wasn't right, just so you know. But I mean, we weren't in the relationship, so I guess we'll just never know.
Right. But
Did they stay together in the end?
No.
Wait, really?
No,
I've never
they
actually
didn't,
seen
and
that
I
movie.
don't remember whether they got back together.
Now I gotta go watch the movie.
Yes, the breakup.
I feel like we have enough homework just getting this show off the ground. Now I gotta go watch the
So I think
movies.
at the end of the day, if people were to take a lesson from this, it's relationships are hard, and we got to make sure that our kids understand that they don't have the bad things as a kid follow us through to the confusing things as an adult. Rejection happens, and if we're not talking about it with our kids, it can sometimes lead to these tragic cases.